and we are been highly privileged to have you at this meeting today. Welcome you, ma'am, and you can take the session formally from here. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Mukesh, for that introduction to Ms. Shivangi. We want this to be a very informal event in the sense that I would invite continuous interaction with the audience at all times. It's not supposed to be planned to be as a full lecture per se. And the more number of questions you have for Shivangi, I think the more we will learn about how she has come to this stage at this point in time. So Shivangi, after this very formal introduction which Mukesh gave us, I would like you to introduce yourself, and I would like you to start right from the from your schooling days and how you began uh, from the young age and how you reached to this point at time. Oh, full disclosure before we begin, actually, Shivangi and I are childhood friends. We used to live in the same building about 40 years ago. And so please don't embarrass me, Shivangi.
Oh, that's putting a very onerous responsibility on me, but I promise to behave. Thank you so much, Shantanu, and thank you to Mukesh as well for coordinating and connecting this up. My pleasure entirely. I think you've given me a very broad canvas, so let me begin by saying that Shantanu and I are both what we like to call ourselves now him no longer, but I do what we used to be non Maharashtrian residents of Tamil Nadu, so to say. We so I grew up in Chennai, and so Chennai is still my what shall I say? Still my soul food. I so my I started my schooling there, and did my entire schooling in Chennai, St. Michael, St. John's in Besanagar, Adarsh for my +2, and then I went to BITS. I ended up doing decently well in my 12th, so I went to BITS, did my triple E electronics and electrical. Um, Graduated thinking I didn't want to do anything further in the technology space, honestly, and decided to do a post graduation in management from IIM Calcutta. I actually always wanted to go to IMC. My dad was from the first batch, and he's always been a huge inspiration for me, and I wanted to sort of go there. But so I went to IMC, did classic consumer marketing, wanted to have a career in consumer marketing, but ended up doing something very, very different. So that's in short up to till I finish my graduation. Like most people at that time, I didn't put too much of thought into why I was doing what I was doing, which I feel now the youngsters have a lot more luxury to think about. So one did well, you did well in science, and you were expected to become either a doctor or an engineer or a architect kind of person. And so without thinking, one went into technology. Similarly, I think I didn't give it too much thought about why I wanted to do a MBA. It was more because it was a done thing to do a master's from a premier institute. But looking back, I think I'm very, very glad that and very, very fortunate to have gone to two very premier institutes, more because of the kind of friends I made there. And today happens to be the International BITS Day, BITSIN Day. We celebrate every year. Okay, so it is, I mean, amazing the kind of friendships that I have built up, and they continue to be the sort of foundation of my life even today. So that's my biggest takeaway from from my more than the academics. I think that is what I took away from both my undergrad and postgrad degrees.
Wonderful. So after a fairly successful career in the corporate world, tell us a bit about that. What did you do after you finished your MBA and the kind of places you worked at?
Okay. I don't know if I have had a slightly unconventional career post IMC. So my corporate job was actually with Kotak. You have campus placements, you get the first job you get, and so I didn't want to do anything in finance, and I ended up getting into Kotak Mahindra. The bank had not been formed then, and so I went to Kotak, and I was placed in in Bangalore. My parents were still in Chennai, and my father had a health setback, so I needed to relocate to Chennai, and they couldn't accommodate me in Chennai. So I was, you're fresh out of college, you think that you're the cat's whiskers, and so I thought, okay, I just quit my job in 1.5 months, and I moved to Chennai. And after a while, I decided I needed to be based in Chennai given the situation at home. And I started looking around for a job, and I wanted to do, as I said, classic consumer marketing. But well, at that time, this was 96, 95, 96. There were no real consumer marketing traditional jobs in available in Chennai for a fresher. So after looking around for a while, I had a friend who was working with a headhunting company, and she, there was a small company starting up in, was already there in Chennai, and she said, "Why don't you check it out?" This was a company called Elnet, and they were doing something in tech. So the first time I went to meet the person who was hiring, she was like, "What are you doing, wasting your life? You come and work for me, do product management." And I told her, "No, no, no, I want to do consumer marketing." And anyway, after a while, I wasn't finding anything, so I went and joined. And thinking all the time this was going to be stopgap. And then I got exposed to the internet, or rather the World Wide Web. And after a few months, the person who had hired me moved to a new company that was being set up in Chennai called Satyam Infoway. And so I followed her to Satyam Infoway, not knowing what was in store. I just went because I thought I, liked working for my boss. Again, examples of how I've done things without really thinking through. Then, and Satyam Info, which later became Sifi, of course, I stayed there for 10 years and had a great time because we were doing some very pioneering work. We were the first ISPs. I was the product manager for the first IP network in the country. By then, I had converted to wanting to work in this space, and had stopped, pushed aside all the FMCG consumer marketing kind of mindset that I had till then, because I thoroughly started enjoying what I was doing. So saw the first network operations center being set up, a whole bunch of things. And midway through my career at Sifi, Sifi decided to tie up with VeriSign to bring the first certifying authority into India for digital signatures. And for some reason, that project fell on my lap, and that was my first exposure to many things. To security, rather to encryption. It was my first exposure to government and policy, and how regulations are formed, and the connection between regulations and technology, and how everything comes together, and setting up something from scratch. So that was hugely exciting. And I used to literally go back and study. Sifi actually taught me to go back and study over weekends, go back to technology, and I, brushed up on a lot of fundas which I should have when I was in college. And then I, of course, got into the world of security. I built a business around it in Sifi. After about 5 years, I went on to Wipro, where I worked for a short period, but I ran a global practice there in the data security space. So that was my corporate stint, so to say.
Okay.
But Sifi had sort of spoilt me for life. I was I realized in Wipro I'm not a big company person. I can't work for a large corporation. I was running a large practice, got to travel the world, as was wont then in a lot of IT companies. They wanted me to move to the US. I didn't want to do any of that, and I realized this is not my place, and so I quit. So that was till then I was in the corporate world.
Okay. And so then when did you decide that you want to have your own startup or you want to venture into the exciting world of startups?
So I more than startups, I think it was entrepreneurship. Same thing, but a slightly different terminology, so to say, right? So I realized in Wipro that this is not happening. So I up and quit, and I said I must do something on my own. And this was in 2008. And so I relocated to Pune, and I decided to explore. I just vaguely knew I wanted to do something in the security space, very unclear about what it was. But I said I must give it a shot. The first venture that I started um, failed. Then I moved on and started something else with another set of friends. Again, spectacular failure.
Tell us more about those failures.
So the first venture I started was in Pune with somebody who it was somebody else's idea. It was actually very interesting about a single identity, and we built a kind of product. Tried. This was when the meltdown was happening, 2008, 2009. We were trying to raise funding. Didn't know anything about fundraising, and I didn't really know the partner too well also whom I was working with. So finally one day a very senior corporate person working for a long time in the IT sector, on the almost retiring, he decided I will put in some money, and so to get us going. um, what we realized after he came on board was that A, he didn't put in the money, B, he had some other agenda, and that we were, so after a point the person I had started this with said this is not working, and he walked out. And after a while I also decided it's not working. The biggest lesson was, you be very careful about whom you bring in as investors. And theoretically people keep saying that, be very careful about who your investors are. That was my first experience without even realizing what we were doing. Then after that I went on to found something else with a couple of close friends. But again, I hadn't thought through the business plan. These two were both of them were highly successful entrepreneurs, and they were like, oh great, security is the happening thing, so let's start a business. And so I realized that two things. One, they didn't know anything about the security business. One was in the BPO space, one was in the IT solutions and services space. And it was very different working with people who didn't want to sort of don't understand the domain, whatever. So it's very, I mean, beyond a point we realized this is not going to work. So I kind of bought them out, and I said, let me take a deep breath and figure out what I should do. I'd come very close to going back to a corporate job, because you have to realize that, and I'm sure all of you do, that you get very, very highly lucrative, highly paying jobs with the kind of profile I had. So it was very, very tempting to not take it up.
Great. So obviously, after your couple of failures, then you seem to have found the right mantra, what do you say? So tell us how you went about and why did you choose this domain of uh, cybersecurity? Because I don't think it was such a major concern of most people. I mean, even today, not too many people think of cybersecurity as something they should be worried about.
Ah, okay. No, my exposure to cybersecurity began in '99, right? So I was very clear that was thing. And while it may not seem like a very big, it's a huge industry, and just growing. A few things is that yes, the average person may not think too much about it, but it is driven by compliance. And the more digital the world goes, the more risks there are, and therefore there is always going to be a market for um, cybersecurity and related IT risk things. So that I was very clear. I was just extremely fascinated by what I was doing, and the fascination still is the more than fascination. I think the kick one gets out of working in this sector is that no 2 days are similar. Every day there is something new that is happening, and the world is grappling with what is going on. So I don't think that was ever a question in my mind about wanting to continue working in cybersecurity. It was just a question of finding the niche of what I would do. It's a bit like saying, I will be a doctor, but finally you have to find your specialization, right? So similarly, you can't just say I will be in cybersecurity, and you need to be very clear what you want to do in that domain. And I think that took a while. 2012, as I was saying, I was ready to, give it all up. And then I met my current co-founder. We just happened to bump into each other. We organized some event together for the World Data Privacy Day in Pune, and we just hit it off. And he was just quit his job in KPMG, and we said, why not align forces and give it a try? Both of us knew we wanted to work in the infosec space. He'd also spent more than a decade doing that. What we wanted to do, we were still unclear. But we said, okay, till then, let's just, we were doing consulting. So we said, let's figure out. We were very clear what we didn't want to do. We were very clear we didn't want to do yet another services business. I had come from the world of system integration, SI services, consulting. So had he, and we're very clear we wanted to build a solution of some sorts. But what it was, we said, let's give ourselves time and figure out the lay of the land before we sort of started building something. And we're very lucky that we got our insights in those first 3 years of just doing consulting services.
So then, tell us about your first customers. How did you acquire them? Or was it in part of your extension of your consulting business, or all those?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so along the way, while we were doing cybersecurity, I kind of ventured also into the world of data privacy. Now, most people think it's one and the same thing, but while they're connected, they're actually very different verticals. And that also happened on a lark. One of my industry friends one day in 2010 told me, this is an area which is going to boom and you should check it out. Yeah, so there is the International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP, which was planning to, they're not held any exam. They had a certification program and they didn't have any exam in India. So I wrote to them saying, whenever you decide to hold an exam in India, please let me know. So about a year later, they decided to hold an exam, and so I took it. We were just I still remember we were about 9 people sitting around a conference table in the Deloitte office in Mumbai, taking the first ever certified information privacy technologist exam in India. And I just did it on a lark, and then I parked it. And then when we started off, around the same time, there's an entity called the Data Security Council of India, which is a NASSCOM body, which was set up by NASSCOM to focus on security and privacy. And this was in 2013, 2012, 2013, when they were very clear that this needed a different focus altogether. And the CEO, who was the founder CEO of DSCI, was somebody I had worked with in the industry earlier, not as in like done engaged with in terms of professional work. So he called me up and he asked me what I was up to, and then after a while, I did some pro bono work for them. They were just starting off. Then after a while, he came back and told me, "Listen, we want to develop a certification program. Will you do some work? This time I'll pay you." So he was our first customer in privacy, so to say. Meanwhile, we were getting some work through friends of friends. So we were helping out small companies, mid-sized companies, set up security programs. And so this was like, so to answer your question specifically, we got our first clients through contacts of people whom we knew, and actually even after so many years we continue getting work only through contacts.
Okay. So tell us some of the biggest challenges you've had while growing your company. Now, how big is your company now?
We're still very small. We're about 25 people, and we yeah, because we built a product. So a little bit about what we do as Arka, just so that I set the context. So we work in two verticals: cybersecurity, or data, overall information security and data privacy. And we work with two market segments: large enterprises and small and mid-size. Now, for the small and mid-sized segment, we've built a platform which essentially enables companies. It's a SaaS platform that enables companies to assess, implement, and manage their security and privacy programs. Like governance, program management, all of that, everything put together. It's the first and only platform of its kind from India. And in fact, many things that I think we have probably unique, because it's been built by people who've been working in that. It's not been built theoretically, it's been built with our customers and their challenges, and even at our end, somebody who's been a CISO and been through the challenges. So all that learning has gone into that. And with large enterprises, we only do privacy consulting, and we are the pioneers and the big the significant player, I would say, in India on privacy. So, but to get here and get this clarity has taken us. I mean, we still keep getting clarity. We also run a privacy and security testing lab. As privacy lab, we're the only ones in India. We also run a dedicated privacy specialist academy. We call it the Arrka Academy, where we train, privacy professionals, senior and middle management people. Where I'm also a faculty on a couple of other programs which are run by others. And I think, I mean, I enjoy teaching. I learn much more than I kind of impart. So those are parts of a little bit of what we do. So I think the journey has been in fits and starts. There has been no template that we could use from somewhere. A lot of it has been learning on the job. And I must say, our clients have been extremely kind to us and patient in terms of figuring out what this is. In fact, one of my clients has one day described it very eloquently. He said that, what you guys are doing is actually building the aircraft while it's on the runway, because new things are coming, new laws are being passed, the landscape is changing, the government is doing stuff, suddenly there are regulations that are coming up, and everybody is struggling to figure that out. Now, how to figure that out, put a structure in place, use standardized sort of implementation techniques, and then build some IP on that. I think that is the fun part of what we've done, and we continue doing. I don't know if that answers your question, Chandra.
Yeah, sure. Then the other thing which most of our students or most of our startups usually face the challenge is how do they scale up, and that's when the biggest challenge of funding comes into the picture. And you already told us about one of your funding, not failure per se, but how that landed you in a bad spot specifically. So, what were your other challenges you faced, and what would you advise the new startups or the new entrepreneurs to look out for or watch out for?
Well, that's a tough one, and I have a very different view from most people who are from the startup sector. Okay. I've been running my company now for the last 9 years. Um, Even now, we know we need funding to scale, but we're very unsure about whether we should go in for Series A or not. I still believe in the traditional way that every business has to generate profits. Okay, so you work towards profit. You work towards profitability. You will not get profits, but it shouldn't be in terms of. So I don't get B2C businesses. So I'm not going to speak for B2C and what is commonly known as GMV, gross merchandising value, and building your company to a valuation and selling it off. um, I That's not my cup of tea. I don't even want to comment on that, right? I run a traditional B2B kind of business. And I think you to be very, very clear. So we did raise, so we operated for the first 3.5 years just doing services. And it is hard because you have to keep ensuring your cash flow has to happen. So cash is king. Okay, that's the first thing, and that never changes. I'm on so many entrepreneur groups and cohorts. Everybody has the same thing. Cash is king. You may, for example, deciding whether to. Of course, nowadays we are not traveling, but earlier it used to be that deciding whether to make that trip to, let's say, Chennai, to meet one customer vis-a-vis paying my rent for the office for the month. What trumps? These are the kind of decisions you end up making. So you have to conserve cash, because otherwise you're not going to be alive to move on later. I think the other thing is that okay, so the story for people like me who had worked for a while and therefore had the financial cushion to carry me through for a while without having an income may not be true for everybody. But I think if you have the financial cushion to support yourself personally, I think it makes a lot of difference. If you're lucky to have a family that is not dependent on your income, for example, is very, very critical. The reason is that you should be able to take your business decisions without having like a gun to your head saying, making you compromise on some of the things that you will end up doing. So that's very important. So keep a track of cash. Second thing is, in terms of raising funding, be very clear that if you're raising funding, you only have to do that. Okay, your entire bandwidth gets sucked up in that, and you then you don't have the bandwidth to focus on your business. So either you have multiple founders where one or two are just focused on funding and one or two are focused on building the business, uh, or you be prepared for taking your eye off one ball. Okay, it is, and I've been through it, so I know what it is like. Okay, so keep some of these things in mind. There is a lot of money available today in the market for funding, provided you have the right plan. Uh, don't Whatever you do, first of all, make sure your heart is in it and you are a part of it. This one foot outside, I will do something in the evening and put a PPT to where, and I'll go and take it to funders. Nobody's going to fund you for that, because finally, end of the day, uh, and I know many people from the investor community, investors fund people and fund their passion, and ideas will change, they'll morph, they'll grow. They look for commitment and persistence. People, whether you will stay the course or not. So a lot of times, people who have stayed the course for, let's say, 3 years, 4 years, then investors kind of know that, okay, this person's not running away. Maybe I'll put in money. Okay, I'm not saying that that is the rule. Many people raise funding on just an idea, but more often than not, the guys who raise funding on ideas are people with a very long track record of success in the past. Okay, so if you're starting off as a very enthusiastic but fresher with an idea, great ideas, but if you don't have something else along with that idea, it's unlikely that you will raise money.
Great,
Or
great.
you may, worst is raise a small sum, which is, maybe 20 lakhs, 25 lakhs, the kind of money that angels may put in. And you may start off and then you'll run out of money in 6 months and you'll be left high and dry. You'd rather have a longer term view.
Wonderful. So these are problems which you have spoken of, which almost every founder faces. Have you faced any founder specifically because you are a woman entrepreneur?
No, actually,
Okay.
not at all.
Okay.
I would say, in fact, that these days, there are funds where people are chasing you just because of your gender, which I feel is unfair and not correct. But see, there are certain challenges. I wouldn't. Okay, so having said that, let me put it this way: that there are certain challenges as a woman professional that one does face. One can't deny that, but I think if you don't. I always give this advice. So folks like us, and when I say us, I'm saying everybody in this who's on this in this session today. We all come from extremely privileged backgrounds. Okay, there are we come from families who believed in us, who have funded us, educated us, and so on. It's important that we
Okay.
are very cognizant of that and do not let so any girl or woman in this audience, don't let that be the factor with which you approach things. So switch off that gender switch. At the end of the day, you're a human being trying to solve a problem. Don't get into that saying, hey, I'm a woman and therefore I should think about it from a particular point.
Excellent. Excellent.
I also believe that there is.
Go on. Go on. Hello.
Yeah. No, I truly believe that there is nothing that a woman cannot do.
Okay. Okay. I will not challenge that statement at all because I have been surrounded by very determined and strong women all my life. So I would agree with you on that. I would now like. I mean, this is kind of the format which we use for all our speakers in general. We want to know their journey so far. The next question, of course, is what do you see the future for your company specifically and for cybersecurity as a domain in our country?
Okay, so I'll speak from the perspective of both cybersecurity and data privacy. They're linked. We are very close to passing our privacy law. Okay, expected to pass in the next session or in the next budget session. The corporate world is already preparing. They're not even waiting for the law. So we're seeing a lot of momentum. The global market itself is changing. So if I can take 2 minutes and give you a perspective, okay, there are laws and regulations driving security. The reason why there are laws and regulations is because the more we go digital, as we say, there are risks. Now to address those risks, somebody needs to crack the whip, right? It's a bit like you buy a car and or a vehicle, you buy insurance because there's a law that pushes you to do that, right? Why do the powers that be have a law? Because they know that until they push people, they're not going to do it. So anyway, so therefore you have laws and regulations, but because data is becoming central to everything, it is driving geopolitics. And India is the second largest digital nation in the world after China today. So our data is very precious, and anything and everything that surrounds that data for the country is going to be extremely critical. This is one perspective. The other is trade is happening around this, and if you look at even wars and conflicts and tensions, they're also being played in cyberspace. So this industry, although the security industry has been around, I would say, as an industry for the last 20 years, and the privacy industry is just starting off, I feel it's just the beginning of things. We still have a long way to go.
Great. So I'm now going to open this session to questions from the audience, so to say. And anybody who has a question, either you can raise your hand and then we'll take your questions from there. You can unmute yourself, or if you have any questions already, you can type it in the chat box and we'll take it from there. Right. And so there's already a couple of things here. I can see there is. Okay, so Jayanti CV says Happy Bitsian Day from another Bitsian. So
I
I
saw
guess
that. Thank you, Jen.
yeah. Okay, and then Shubha Lalita has a question. Raising funds from investors versus taking loans for business, what would you suggest?
Okay, in order of priority, the first funding you should look for is always from your customers, in the sense revenue. Okay. Second, debt. So if you run a business where banks can lend to you, like you have like in our kind of business, banks don't lend because of the products that we have. But if you run a more traditional kind of business, and if a bank is lending to you, please. So debt is second from banks, nothing like it. Three, if you can find debt from somewhere else, and the last is equity. So investors should be your last priority. Please treat equity as gold. Think 10 times before you give away equity to anybody.
Okay. So anybody else? Come on, students, where are you? So Shubham has a question. He says, why should the investor be the last priority?
I'm not saying the investor be the last priority. I'm saying funding by giving away equity should be your last priority. But having said that, let me qualify it also by saying that when you raise funding via equity, be sure that the investor who comes in, you're not just taking the investor in for her money. You're taking the investor in because they bring many other things to the table. So when you're looking around for funding, make sure that funds plus many other things have to align, and make sure you get that value out of your investor, not just the money.
Okay, so I guess that answered Shubham's question very well. Any more questions? So Mukesh actually is is an expert on cybersecurity in our university, and he works in that domain here. And so he was also quite interested when he saw your profile, and we should bring you on. So Mukesh, if you have any questions, please.
No, sir, no major questions. Ma'am had explained the things in a detailed manner.
Okay.
We will have a private discussion. So how we can able to get the help from ma'am to support our students in the cybersecurity region.
Okay, so Mukesh is going to recruit you as a teacher, Shivangi, since you
not
said that. Since you said you like to teach.
Want to recruit as a teacher, we want to get the support. Ma'am, if some internship opportunities are available for our students, or if she will guide our students in such a way, what are all the certifications or what are all the skill sets they should have to be upskill while they are doing the BTech program in SRM. Those side of things that we will get things from ma'am.
Sure. Happy anytime. Yeah, and we do offer internships. We do take students for internships. So happy to work with you on that as well.
Wonderful.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
So I guess nobody has any other question. Any last words of wisdom, Shivangi? Not just to students, but to also the other faculty or somebody who might be aspiring to become an entrepreneur.
Somebody has a question, Ashwin.
Oh yeah, there is
Is it
a
a
one.
good idea
Okay.
to try being an entrepreneur at the onset
After undergraduation.
after undergrad? See, no right or wrong answers. If you have a great idea, you should check it out for sure. There's no harm. But I think you also get a lot of benefits by working in the corporate world for a while. You just learn how the business world works, some basics of how a business is run, certain basic etiquettes. Many of these things are some things which you learn when you work. Okay, so work experience helps in that way. Second, you build your networks. I mean, I don't think me or my co-founder would have got half the business we did if we hadn't. So we have a huge network of having worked over 10 years and built that network of contacts and colleagues, which has been of tremendous use. So I think, at least in my case, I would say that work experience has helped. A few years, yes. Be careful about what kind of work ex you choose. If you get to work in a young company or a small company doing interesting stuff, even if it will pay you half of what your friends would be earning in a large multinational or an extremely well funded company, opt for it, because the sheer learning that happens in a smaller setup which is growing is nothing compared to what is huge compared to what you would get in a large setup, because you end up working on a smaller area. In we work in a small company, there are no structures, you're thrown in at the deep end, and you learn many things which you otherwise wouldn't learn in a large setup. So if at some point in time you aspire for entrepreneurship, uh, do work for a smaller company, I would say.
So Ashwin is from one of our entrepreneurship batches, and I'm glad he asked you
Ah,
that question. Very well.
okay.
Yeah.
I also want to say that entrepreneurship is not just about having your own setup. Today, even companies look to hire people who have what is called an entrepreneurial bent of mind, taking ownership, driving things. I mean, that is something which even the largest of corporates struggle with. So, if you have that mindset, it's a mindset more than anything else.
So yeah, I think we are coming to the end of our session here. So as I said, Shivangi, any last words of wisdom for the audience here?
Uh, I would say, what would I say? So, first thing is something which somebody told me when I was starting off my journey, was that, whatever assumptions that you make, especially in an Excel sheet, things look so neat and tidy, right? Said whatever assumptions you make on the cost side, multiply by 5, and whatever assumptions you make on the time side also multiply by 5. In the sense, if you think this is what I'm going to do in 2 years, so like this is what I'm going to do in a year, and this is the amount of revenues I'm going to make in a year, and or I'm only going to spend, let's say, X amount of money. In reality, you will take 5 times that time and you will end up spending 5 times more of that money. Okay, so and that has been so true, and not just in my case. I have seen that in multiple other entrepreneurs case. Okay. Second is, just you have to be extremely persistent, because the kind of profiles that you all have, you will always have a fabulously paying job available to you. Okay. But the thing is, you have to remain focused. I remember, I think more than a decade ago, attending a talk by Sanjeev Bikhchandani. He's the founder of Naukri. Okay, and a very successful entrepreneur. And I remember something he said which stayed with me. He said, the problem with folks like you, and he was addressing a bunch of students and professionals who are looking at entrepreneurship. Said the problem with folks like you is that you always have an option of going back to work. And why does a traditional, and I'm a Marwadi, and I'm not trying to typecast, but I'm just quoting him. He said, why does a traditional person who comes from a traditional Marwadi family always succeed is because he or she doesn't have that option. They can't give up and then go and work for a secure, corporate job. So remember that if you say that I don't have an option, I have to make this work, you will find a way of making this work. But if you're constantly looking over your shoulder, or looking at your friend who's going around, fancy flying business class and driving fancy cars, then you have a problem. Okay, so persistence, stay focused, but at the same time, be very, very nimble. Be prepared to grab opportunities come at you from places where you would have never imagined. And the fourth important thing I always say is build your relationships. Don't burn your bridges. A customer may not give you an order now, he or she will come back after 2 years. Don't badmouth anybody. And the world is very large and the world is also very small, so keep both those things in mind.
Great. So thank you very much, Shivangi, for taking your time and talking to our group here today. I'm sure they learned a few very important things today. And I wish we had actually hosted you in person. We talked about this a couple of years ago, and then the pandemic struck. And so, but I guess online is as good as it nowadays. And so maybe next time you're in Chennai, we will have you down here and we'll have a actual interaction with our folks here and show you around what we have been doing in the field of entrepreneurship and others. Yeah.
Would love to. Thank you.
So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So if there are no more questions, we will close the session. Mukesh, you have something for the students?
No, sir.
Nothing.
Not much.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Shivangi.
And you can always drop me a mail anytime. Privacy@arrka.com, ARRKA, or go to our website. You can just post a query. I get all the mails. So anytime you need any help, please reach out to me.
Definitely.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye. Bye.